Good evening, everybody. Your eyes do not deceive you. The Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast is down to its skeleton crew on this week's episode because it's 100 degrees out in Texas and I'm not going outside anytime soon. We have an interesting show for you today, considering that AEW ran unopposed last night, and safe to say they didn't do well. What are we talking about? Well, find out next on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. Be right back.
Big old bell, big old bell, big old bell, big old bell. All I really want is that big old bell, big old bell, big old bell, big old bell. All I really need that big old bell, big old bell, big old bell. All I really want is that big old bell, big old bell, big old bell. Big old bell, every old Manolo.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 25 of the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. It is I, Damian G, in the host seat today. The Giant Crab, Jamal, to my left on screen. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank God baseball is back. Wednesday was the longest 24 hours in the history of revolving around the sun. But there's baseball, and it starts off with two doubleheaders, so let's go Mets.
Did you catch the All-Star game at all?
I never really watched the All-Star game, and that's largely because the game doesn't matter. They only pitch for 2.5 innings, and it's on Fox, and that usually means Joe Buck. And I would rather stick my dick in a pencil sharpener than listen to Joe Buck. The home run derby, though, did you catch any of that?
I did. I caught a good chunk of that. That, you know what? I feel that's baseball slam dunk contest, but better. It was fun.
I hate the coverage on ESPN. I think the way, basically, you want to see the ball go as far as humanly possible, and ESPN was doing all of these goofy camera angles instead of showing the ball go as far as humanly possible. And then they have all of these 3D metrics and gimmicks and graphics and lasers and all this other stuff and AR that they borrowed from WWE, and it's just like the home run derby is the same it's been for 50 years. A dude with a big-ass bat knocking the stuffing out of the ball 500 feet. Correct. Now, the question is, the balls that they were using, because everybody was hitting balls 475, use those in real games. I mean, if you don't want them to hit the ball, pitch better. But if they touch it, it's going a mile. That's baseball. I mean, but again, that's a story for a different podcast. Yeah.
Which we could talk about ad nauseum if we had to, because
straight facts will sell us someday.
But AEW brought home what they thought was going to be a very interesting and dynamic show last night. I did catch a good chunk of it, and then the main event was Jericho against Kingston in a barbed wire everywhere match. Now, AEW going into this was 0 for 1. On barbed wire, everything matches with the Moxley Omega match and the fizzle heard around the world. Kingston and Jericho, two people you wouldn't synonymously put wrestling together in what seemed to be a death match, but yet AEW thought this was going to be a great idea. This was going to be a ratings get because it's a blood feud. Eddie Kingston is now apparently the man of the people, and Jericho is the person that is persona non grata, and they want to destroy him at all costs. Right. While they sing Judas when he comes to the ring. So I caught a good chunk of the match, and I got to say off the top, I didn't like it. Ooh. I didn't like most of it. And I thought this was a matchup of two people who are not great dance partners. If it was in a different avenue in terms of match style, I might have given it a better grade. It just fell flat for me. If you've seen one barbed wire Eddie Kingston match, in my opinion, I love Eddie. You've seen them all. Jericho, trying to be 52 years old in barbed wire matches needs to cut the bullshit and accept the fact that, he needs to lay on the slapstick in order to be, in my opinion, relevant. And then when we get to the ending, just look, I know he's their Tommy Dreamer. I know Eddie's their Tommy Dreamer, but goddamn, this would have been a perfect time to at least get one match. His beating Raven match could have been here, but it wasn't. And you've gone on record and said that you are not an Eddie Kingston fan. And you probably just saw this coming. So what are your thoughts on barbed wire everywhere and nowhere at the same time?
Well, here's the thing. Was it an overproduced mess of a match? Absolutely. But that is to be expected of AEW when they over promise on their gimmicks. With that said, though, I don't think it was as bad as the internet makes you believe. I do think that it was not good if you are a fan of these type of matches.
Sure.
Now, that's kind of the problem. It was almost like watching Division III sports. It is the sport that you see played on the professional level, but there's just something missing that makes it the NBA or hockey or baseball. And it doesn't mean that Kingston and Jericho aren't good individual wrestlers. The couple of things that were working against me is, number one, I don't like Eddie Kingston anymore because I don't give a shit about Eddie Kingston. As a person, as a character, as a player, him being a lovable loser, well, when I started to think about it, that's been his whole career. And when he, kind of did this thing and he's this lovable loser, fighting for the people, the difference between him and CM Punk is that Punk had a belt. That's what it is. Even the Jets won a championship 50 years ago. So yeah, it's the wrestling is about wins and losses. AEW specifically said that they're about wins and losses. And if you do not win, and we've seen this with other gimmicks, Sean Spears, the Perfect 10. How are you perfect and you lose? Habitually lose. You are cannon fodder. So that's what it is for me. And then, of course, the reaction to that isn't the fact that you lose. It's the fact that you never get a shot. The man's keeping you down. All these other trappings, instead of the fact that, no, if you've been divorced 6 times, it may be a you problem.
Looking at you, Ric Flair.
I'm just saying, it may be you. You may have some inward looking to do. And then, of course, there is Jericho, who's long of the tooth, well past his prime. Not saying that he doesn't have some viability, but he's Bartolo Colon out there. And if you know, you know. And if you know, you know.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
And again, I'm literally in a Met shirt right now. I love Bartolo, but he was 75 fucking years old, and he shouldn't have been out there giving up 900-foot home runs. I could have hit off Bartolo, and I'm blind in one eye. But the idea is, you had just a recipe for disaster, and unfortunately, Khan is selling you steak tartare when it's honestly a sloppy Joe. And that's a different problem. I think to give this match gravitas, don't add more to the match, add less. Let them tell the story. Don't take the storytelling away from them. Mm-hmm. And that's what you do when you add these gimmicks that are bigger than the personalities. And that's hard to do with an overblown personality like Eddie Kingston and another overblown personality like Jericho. And then you overshadow that with barbed wire and sharks in the graphics and all this stuff because it's Shark Week, don't you know? And that's, even before the bell rings, it's an overbloated mess. So this blood feud that's supposed to happen is happening because Kingston and Jericho are supposed to be telling the story, and when it mattered the most, you took the mic away from them and gave us sharks wrapped in barbed wire.
And apparently locks that can't be opened in 45 seconds on live TV. Apparently.
No. So this is what you do. You want to padlock a shark cage. Have the heel come down with bolt cutters from now on. Just do that.
Make it easier.
And I don't mind that. I thought it was actually pretty hilarious that the two thinner guys could fit through the barbed wire cage. I'm like, oh no, fuck, we gotta go. And they went through the cage, and then fathead Matt Menard could not get that balloon animal through the barbed wire. through the bars of the cage. And when Hager had to stay. But the bottom line is that yes, there were a lot of moving parts, and they were quickly, rushing, and it ended. The match didn't. Again, typical of AEW, the match ended, and it didn't have any time to breathe before Jim Ross pushes you out the door into another.
Thank you. It's not just me that hates that. Jesus,
because we got to get to that 50th showing of Independence Day every week, or whatever the movie is, or whatever. And that is rather annoying when you want to sit there and revel. And it just ends with Eddie Kingston sitting on the apron with a stupid, grin on his face.
The grin on his face.
And he's just like, damn it. Oh, you lost again, because that's what you do. And then, of course, they had the barbed wire mattress that they didn't use, so they had to get that spot in. And it's just, that's it's an overblown mess. And it really doesn't help anybody. And it doesn't end the feud. It just doesn't.
And it's supposed to, that's supposed to be the ender. A barbed wire match should be the blow off to any blood feud. And yet we're going to get this again.
Right.
Again.
Right. So really what the match should have been was a last man standing match or an I Quit match. Something that can have the level of barbarism that you would want from people like that. It's going to get violent. It's going to get dangerous, but it doesn't, and it includes the shark cage, whatever. But the fact is that you, when you have Justin Roberts out there with a barbed wire lace microphone, you've already taken the wind out of the sails of the two guys telling the story, and that's unfortunate.
So I guess my next question in regards to this match. And I hate putting fantasy booking hats on, but I'm going to ask because why not?
Yeah, why not?
What would have been the better way to book this match in terms of its flow? Not the result, but the flow of the match.
Well, number one, they needed 5 more minutes.
Yes. Okay, good. So it wasn't just me who thought it was abrupt. Okay.
Yeah, they needed 5 more minutes because they were rushing to get key spots in, but unfortunately, they didn't really matter because you've already it's a Michael Bay movie, whatever the story was, you've it doesn't really matter anymore because I'm just here for explosions. This thing is 2.5 hours. I don't know what it's about, but shit is going to blow up, and that's kind of what the match was. So the direct answer to the question is I really think that it should the shark cage incident actually should have happened earlier. I think that maybe it's a little bit more, of ingenuity with Daniel Garcia picking the lock the whole time while he's up there. Maybe he realizes that he can squeeze through the cage and just says fuck it and jumps.
Right.
Hey, it's not his fault that they do a thing, and the cage wasn't super high. Maybe Ruby and Anna have a tussle with the cage, raising it and lowering it and stuff like that. I just think that give the guys in the ring who are, old, give them a chance to breathe a bit while the focus shifts to the cage. And then we had the run in, and then we had Ty Conti out there, and then, the whole thing. I don't necessarily need all of that. And also really, it's a barbed wire everywhere death match. Do we really, 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 really need to keep gender lines going within the confines of gender lines?
Thank you.
I don't care who you're out there. Hello. I don't care who's out there. Anybody can get it because it's barbed wire everything. There needs to be some suspension of it should be anarchy. It should be anarchy in the arena, don't you know? And that's a thing that's kind of like there's so many moving parts. It's kind of hard to keep a track of everything. And then in the end, you have this kind of anticlimactic finish with the expected result of Jericho winning because Eddie Kingston's a fucking loser and nobody wants to admit that. Good night, everybody. Shark Week.
Yes, everything's about sharks at that point. Baby
right.
Shark, mama shark,
freaking
and grandpa
sharks
shark.
with freaking lasers on their heads.
So I'm with you in terms of we should have had less shenanigans, jumbled.
Yes.
Less is more.
Yes.
The bowl cutter idea, genius. I agree with you completely. The thing that tripped me up at the beginning was why? I know storyline wise, but really, Ruby Soho's gonna the person behind the controls. Like you're just begging to tip your hand on. Well, Tay's gonna run in, and then yeah, sure, the Anna Jay turn really didn't have enough time to breathe from the week prior when they were popping off to each other backstage. So didn't leave it enough time. That's the one thing actually I took away from this is more. I can't believe I'm even saying this. I am more interested in the Jericho Appreciation Society than I am about the Blackpool Combat Club. And I never thought I would utter those words, but I am more interested in the dorkiness and the wonkiness of Jericho and his cronies. And a thing about this that I've enjoyed is actually Daniel Garcia finding a modicum of charisma. People were saying that he was going to be, his in-ring is impeccable, but he's essentially Alberto Del Rio, the black hole of charisma. But having him in this role of being the shooter that could make cornball jokes, from the looking like a boy band member with the Kangol, to having a little bit of fun with the character. Yeah. I think this does a lot more from it. I'm going to say the word sports entertainment perspective or respective than, the Blackpool Combat Club is a thing. And on paper, it should be great, but it's not.
Respectfully disagree. On paper, it makes fuck all sense.
It's not great. And
no, I'm saying, like, on paper, it doesn't make sense because you have Brian who came out and said, well, I want to lead this boy band of young upstarts.
Correct.
With my friend who's a 20-year veteran. Okay. Well, we disagree on how we're going to start the boy band. So let's get a 40-year veteran out there.
There's only one boy band member of that whole group.
Right. So it doesn't.
And he wrestles for the other company.
Yeah, right. And then Yuta just comes in. He just wanders in the door. He's like, hey, guys, you're in.
Happy to be here.
You're hired.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Right. As far as the thing goes, real quick, as far as the thing with Garcia, and I get why the Blackpool Crochet Club came out. What I don't get is why the Dark Order didn't get involved. Anna was out there.
Right.
There's no reason to believe that the Dark Order is anything other than fine. Well, Anna's out there. I'm not saying that they should turn heel with her, but what I am saying is, where were they?
Hanging out with Hangman in the back.
Right. And that was the main event. So it's not like they had anything else to do for the show. Right. So, we could have seen a well-timed split. Maybe there's some in the Dark Order that helps the Blackpool Club. Maybe there's some of the Dark Order that helps the Appreciation Society. That's another little wrinkle that could have been exploited because Anna decided to come out there on her own and make a choice. So maybe Reynolds picks a side and maybe Silver picks a side. Maybe Uno is like, fuck this. I'm washing my hands of everything. Preston Vance
10 goes on his own. Yep.
Yeah, he's coked out of his mind. So who knows? But and who knows what code is? But the idea is she's a part of that group. There's no reason to believe that she left them, except she left them, and they don't seem to care about that.
That's the thing about the Dark Order was I remember distinctly they were leading to an internal split a couple of months ago. Right. Where they weren't getting along. They had Stu and Alan Angels and everybody was bickering. This would have been the perfect time to re-explore that. But if we come to look at the Dark Order, it's basically Reynolds and Silver and 10 and Uno.
They're down to 4.
Yeah. That's it.
That's
it. The only reason why it still exists is because, and in my opinion, the only reason it still exists, Brody Lee Jr. That's it. That's the only reason it still exists.
Right.
I would have disbanded them a while ago.
Right. But I still think they should disband him. And as far as the kid goes, he can go away for a few years and then come back. He will always be Brody Lee. He will always be, that person. I don't think he needs to be married to this thing for the next 5-6 years until he graduates or turns 18 or whatever the case may be. But they shouldn't string that along. They shouldn't string those guys along for fucking 10 years to wait for this kid to grow up. That's insane.
They could just have that be something, in real life at conventions and they hang out like, one-offs. That's fine.
Yeah.
But So AEW, like I said at the beginning, they ran unopposed. And by
Yeah.
what I mean by that, we talked about it before we came on the air, is that there were no other sports on last night.
Nothing.
The only thing of a sports fan that would be interested in would be the ESPYs, because the Major League Baseball All-Star Game was on Tuesday, I believe.
It was, yes.
There's no more NBA, there's no NFL, there's no NHL playoffs.
Nope.
It was strictly the ESPYs and Dynamite. And
Right.
they didn't even pull 1 million.
Right. So I have the ratings in front of me. The persons overall 2 years old plus is 910,000. And the way Showbuzz Daily, which is where I'm reading this from, characterized the graphic is with a green, yellow, or red being black, being green being blue, and yellow being in the middle. And this was an average, leaning towards below average rating per Showbuzz Daily. And I think it's very interesting because of the fact that they ran virtually unopposed with any considerable sports competition. The ESPYs was on ESPN, and that was the only show from 8 until it ended. And they did, a pretty decent 0.26 in the key demo of 0.42 in 1849. So a lot of people, presumably, that would want to watch sports probably didn't watch Dynamite and watch the ESPYs. But the bottom line is that the key demo, which is the one that really matters, and that's 18 to 49, they were number one in. And if you look on Twitter, Tony Khan tweeted that out, that they were number one for the 5th week in a row. That statement is true. But the fact that the viewership is actually down is also true. And for this show, which had a very high-profile gimmick match to end it and a very high-profile specialty week, don't know if you noticed, it was Shark Week, and they gave out goofy-ass hats to let you know that it was Shark Week in Atlanta or Duluth or suburbs. And it was number one. The number 2 show was Tucker Carlson. Now, granted, it murdered the boomer market, which is 50 plus, but Tucker Carlson, between 18 and 49, was a couple percentage points, a couple hundredths of a percentage point below AEW, followed by the Real Housewives of Chattanooga, wherever the hell it is this week, I don't know. A show in Spanish that I'm not going to try to pronounce because that's racist, and The Five, which is a show on Fox News. So there was no breaking news. There was no other live team sports. The ESPYs was on ABC, and that's fine too. But it was AEW followed pretty closely behind Tucker freaking Carlson on Fox News. So yeah, that kind of tells you about the demographic of who's watching. But it also tells you that 910,000 when you run unopposed is pretty interesting. There are those that are going to tell you that ratings don't matter and television is dead, so who cares? And they're going to move the goalpost and say that people DVR it up to 7 years down the road, so the ratings don't matter anyway. Except it does, because this is how they make their money via advertising.
Correct.
So yes, number one in the key demo, but it's a huge asterisk because the actual viewership was down. And if it was down for this, then what does that really say about the product? Is Jericho and Kingston the draw that they thought it was? Maybe, maybe not. Is the fact that the team Wardlow was not on the show last night?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, dang, you're right. He wasn't on the show last night.
He was not. So did that have something to do with the lack of actual, total viewers? I don't know. I don't know, because I can't see minute by minute stuff. But the bottom line is that considering, if you ask Khan, this is number one. But the real is less people watch this week than last week. So what does that mean for this feud that didn't end last night? It did not blow off.
No.
And people decidedly not watched when they didn't have much other sports options. I think that's pretty telling of the Kingston Jericho feud and AEW as a brand. We're well past the honeymoon phase, but it is interesting to see that the growth isn't what their fans, it isn't what they want you to believe you to be. So,
it's stagnated.
A little bit. And I mean, and you can throw all the other bullshit aside. It's the dead of summer and people are traveling. So what? I mean, I don't care. People still watch TV. And I don't care where you watched it. People still watch TV in America. So if this is a must-see show, it's not like you can't watch it anywhere else in the country, around the world. So the bottom line is that without major competition, these ratings, they should have been blown out of the water. But they were not. They were closer than they should have been. And that is an interesting commentary on the direction of the brand, potentially, and the direction going forward. So hopefully that is a canary in the coal mine, signaling that we should end this Jericho Kingston feud immediately, if not sooner. Please, Jesus, don't drag this out to All Out.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the injuries that are mounting up in wrestling in general and AEW have a lot to do with this. If Brian was healthy, and we would have gotten the crochet club, as you like to call them,
They did,
as opposed to Kingston and Jericho in this spot. You know, I went through the card last night. I looked again. I said, who else could have been in that spot? And look, just like 182 says, Omega, Punk, Bryan, all the top stars, if they would have been there, it might have been a higher draw. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because the general wrestling fan knows who all those people are for the most part. Omega, Punk, Bryan, etc.
right.
Not many people know who Eddie Kingston is at all. In terms of star power, we know who he is. Inner workings know who he is, but Punk and Bryan, those are former WWE guys, and I know a lot of people hate the fact that AEW leans on them, but let's be real here. They're a name. We've talked about this numerous times. They are a name that does have some outside reach besides wrestling.
Right.
Obviously, it wasn't going to do well with Jericho and Kingston. So you're right. To your point earlier, did Khan overbet himself? I think he had no choice but to put that match in the main event. But still, that should show that the talent level is not as up to television rating snuff as people make it out to be, because they got a lot of great workers in AEW, but not a lot of people jump off the screen.
Right. And that's kind of my point, though. And you could argue that if Omega was there, well, fuck that, because Omega hasn't been there since November. So that's not really the issue. Punk and Bryan were there. Well, those are known knowns. They weren't going to be there. That was not the case. We don't know when Punk is coming back, and it could be later this year, maybe by All Out, and Bryan possibly by All Out too. So the point is that, yes, I do agree with the idea that AEW does have a hideously bloated roster with a very short star power shelf life. What I disagree with or am questioning is, what does this say about the product itself, where they run unopposed and have such a stagnated rating? Do they need to reinvest in their stars so that they actually have a viable 2, 3, and 4 person? If it is next man up, and this is the next man up, and this is what they pull, then what are we talking about here?
182 in the chat says, those are still good ratings. AEW is not for everyone, and that's okay. The core fans of AEW will always watch.
Agreed. But I'm talking about growth.
Agreed. Yeah, we're talking about growth and revenue. We can watch the revenue.
Yeah, the revenue is the key demo, which they were number 1 in. So that is the truth. But the growth that we're talking about is the fact that they didn't do more. That's what I'm saying. This is like the Warriors winning by 5 when they should have won by 50. We're talking about, on paper, they have the parts in place to knock it out of the park last night, and for whatever reason, they kind of didn't. So the ratings will be fine. So everybody's that's invested in AEW and their contributors.
But inevitably, you're going to want to grow your audience.
You have to grow your audience.
You have to grow your audience, or else you're running stagnant. And we talked about this about SmackDown. It's been running stagnant for God knows how long. And we'll talk about that after the commercial break here on the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. Thank you for tuning in with us. Myself, Damon G, and Jamal. We will be right back. Big Gold Belt Media is your golden standard for all of your media needs. Visit biggoldbelt.com for pro wrestling info, movies, comics, and even more digital content. On all of your social medias, follow us at Big Gold Belt all across the board. Listen to this show and more on your SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back, everybody, to the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast. Again, Damien G and Jamal in the driver's seat today, talking AEW, talking barbed wire everywhere, ratings. And before we hit the break, I briefly brought up that SmackDown is going through a similar stagnation in terms of their overall quality and product and ratings. So I know we talked about that too, Jamal, and I think it's really simple. You don't have Roman. And even if you did have Roman on your show consistently, it would get stale. Because a lot of people are saying that the bloodline is starting to get stale. Now, does that have to do more with them or the lack of challengers to their stable?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's had a 43-year run as champion. He's beaten everybody 6 times over. Eventually, once that suspension of disbelief that something can happen goes away, it kind of makes everything a bit redundant, and that's, I guess, where they are. But also, I mean, I don't know if, because people are loyalists, they are addicted to brand loyalty, and there are those that are going to watch WWE regardless. Sure. They could have a WLC match on SmackDown to close the show this week, and people would still feel the need to tune in, and that's fine. The idea is SmackDown has, pretty much underdelivered. And as far as Fox goes, the ratings were supposed to be, a lot higher than they were. They are not. Fox paid $1 billion for this property. And the question is, in 2024, considering where SmackDown is today, does Fox actually re-sign? Do they work out another deal with WWE? And more importantly than that, is SmackDown still worth $1 billion to Fox?
Is WWE in general worth it to Fox? Because with all the Vince McMahon hullabaloo and the allegations, and
still waiting for another shoe to drop on that.
Yep, the Wall Street Journal reports, and who's to say when it's going to drop? But we talked off air about the fact that WWE might have promised at least 2 million viewers for SmackDown on an average.
I heard five because they're doing 2. Yeah, they're doing 2-ish now. Low 2 point something. Right. I heard 5, but this was, of course, a couple years ago when they signed the deal in 2019. So the question is, is that property worth $1 billion when honestly Fox can just run MasterChef again for 2 hours or whatever cheaply produced, overhyped show that they watch, Crime Scene Kitchen again.
WMAC Masters, bring that back.
Bring American Gladiators, bring it back.
Oh, bring it back. No Hulk Hogan as the host, though. No, we got to bring back Adam Lee. You got to bring back.
Don't bring back Adam Lee. With us? I don't think Adam Lee can work anymore. I believe he had an aneurysm.
That's right. I do recall that.
Yeah. But either way, there are other options for Fox, considering they do have a sports division. They do have, other shows that they can work into the fold. Mm-hmm. None of those are going to add up to $1 billion. So what? And then also, for some of the year rather, the XFL will be coming back next year.
Oof.
And that is a thing. Friday Night Football, XFL style on Fox. I don't know, if that's even going to be a thing. Who has the rights to that? But the bottom line is, if Fox does, is that something that you replace SmackDown with? That is very possible, assuming that they have the rights to that. And that's kind of what it is. Does Fox still hold up. I mean, the SmackDown rather still hold up to Fox. And in 2024, I want to say January 2024, that's going to be the $1 billion question. I'm not sure if they are still on that trajectory.
I don't see it unless they add another wrinkle to the programming to make it worthwhile, especially like you just said, we don't know when the other shoe is going to drop with Vince and the allegations. Will he still be in the company as CEO at that point by the time 2024 rolls around? I don't understand why Fox paid $1 billion for WWE programming. I thought that was a big, quote a draft, quote, it's a reach. But you know what? It's not my money. But at the same token, with the exception of the occasional NXT match, I have no longer watched WWE as religiously as I used to. And I am in that key demographic as a wrestling fan. So again, this is what happens when you book yourself into a corner or paint yourself into a corner where your biggest attraction is showing up at 30% of the shows. And you've left the double A team to run the show while you're on the injured list, so to speak. So,
yeah, talk about next man up.
Who?
That's we have the new vicious Viking Raiders, so there's that.
Kratos and friends. Yeah.
Okay.
We can go back. We can go back to the New Day, but I don't think the general populace wants to see the New Day, if you get what I'm saying.
All right.
So who else is there? Riddle. He's on Raw. The brand splits over.
You
Drew.
know who's there. Goldberg.
I mean, he's in the back pocket, sure, but I mean consistently day to day, like.
But whenever that's happened before, though, WWE has kind of gone into their back pocket and consistently brought up and rehashed these old things. And yes, that only gets you from point to point, but we're talking consistently weekly. They need to put on 52 shows a year, well, 50-ish, because I think they take off Christmas. They need to put on a shit ton of shows, and the bottom line is that they may not have enough for a number of different reasons to get them over the hump. And it's July of 2022. We're talking 5 months until the end of this year, plus another 12. So that is a year and a half until that show is up for bid versus Fox and NBC and whoever wants it. Is it worth it for big television to invest in WWE nowadays with the scandal, with the shows, with the content? More importantly, there's the content. I don't know. And who knows? And if not Fox, then who? Maybe NBC just reinvests in it, and takes it over. Hell, will even WWE be sold? Could be sold in 18 months. Who knows?
And that is something we've talked about on the show about when Nick Khan was doing what Nick Khan does. We were thinking, what's the purpose? What's the point? And I know on multiple occasions we've brought up potentially the House of Mouse,
right?
Potentially throwing their money at it. And the way it's going now with Vince and co, I'd say if Disney wanted to throw some money at me, have fun. Right. I'm out.
Right. I mean, that is interesting, but it's just everything remains to be seen. There's a lot of balls in the air in that regard. But I just think that's just something to keep in your back pocket for the next 18 months. SmackDown could absolutely turn it around and get a ton better. There were those rumors about WWE upping their rating to TV 14. Didn't see anything happen with that. But if that does happen, that's something that we talked about last week. How does that, make its way throughout the company? What does it actually mean, for the company? I don't think that's going to save them, but they need to do something differently. And that's unfortunately not something that they're going to do because of Vince. I mean, Vince is the son of the moon and the stars. So,
well, it's a narcissist project. Vince has to be Vince. Vince has to have it done his way. Where I don't know if we talked about it last week because I wasn't here, but the report where a handful of women SmackDown wrestlers basically went on record and saying Vince wants to make himself the show, which it's his company. And they felt like they're not being used at all. So it's like, why are we bothering showing up? It's like they're going back to the dark ages of the Divas division. And it's true. we talk about using your roster. We talk about AEW being bloated at the top, but at least they're trying to use their people in the mid card. WWE, not so much. I mean, aside from Corbin, McAfee, what now? Now they're trying to boost Madcap. What else is there in the mid card beside the New Day?
Right.
And them fighting Butch and Sheamus for like 4,722 times. SmackDown's in trouble. From a view, I know they'll get their ratings, but we're talking about, again, growth and development.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
and SummerSlam's when?
Next week, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But the question is, and looking forward, because we're talking about an 18-month window, does that force the hand of NXT to bring those guys up a little bit earlier? Does that force the hand of those college kids that they wind up signing to get them into NXT a little bit faster? Does that speed that process up to get new blood in the on TV?
You know what? They tried this. Remember when they tried to bring up Ciampa, Gargano, Aleister Black, and Ricochet to Raw to inject new life into the programming, and then they wound up just being tag teams.
But see, here's the thing, and this is the difference between then and now is the fact that NXT is actually part of the maturation process.
Correct.
At first, it was not. So you sending up Ciampa and not telling us why he's a big deal, or telling us that, like, yeah, this guy's great in NXT. That's not the same thing as a person that's enveloped in the WWE, culture. And NXT wasn't at the time. So I think that these kids, hopefully, God willing, are going to have a better go of it and flow a lot better into the WWE ecosystem. If they don't, then what?
They're going to bring back Goldberg 400 more times.
Goldberg, 2-hour Iron Man match. Book it.
Go bring back the Fiend and all of his personas, and he'll come out to the Royal Rumble about 7 times.
Undertaker said, "Never say never."
Oh, please don't. Please. I don't need Mark breaking another hip, man. I don't need that. I think this is another reason why the Big E injury is a big deal, because at the very least, you could have had another upper mid-card babyface on SmackDown, because I feel as if all the star power is at Raw now, so you would have had at least Big E. And unfortunately, accidents happen in wrestling. Yeah. But another thing happened in wrestling this week, as always, and we'll keep it within WWE and AEW. Little barbs were taking place on social media. And this guy has been known to put his foot in his mouth every so often. He's been called out on some of the dumb stuff he says because, he likes doing a doggy style, and he still thinks he's like a new age outlaw. And apparently he puts his foot in his mouth more than I would like to admit. But there is a gentleman by the name of Road Dogg Jesse James, sir. And he went on social media or an interview, I don't know which, and said that if MJF wouldn't make it in the WWE if he was to come over.
Right.
Now,
I have the quote if you want me to read it.
Yeah, read the quote.
He said this on the Sports Kita podcast.
Sports Kita, of course it is.
Right. I don't think that he would work within the same parameters. And if he didn't, he wouldn't be there. He's not a huge guy. His in-ring work is good, but he's not going to move the needle or anything. I don't think. But nobody does these days, so I'm not really, dogging him too much. But yeah, he has a lot of creative control right now, and maybe AEW, took some away from him, and that's where he's at. But we'll see when he comes back and where they go. But yeah, I don't think he makes it too far in WWE. He says, and I continue, I think Vince, in my mind, would use him as a manager, maybe like the next Paul Heyman or something like that. I met the kid, spend the day with him in an autograph signing. He's a pleasure. He was respectful, and I loved it, and I loved the kid. But we'll just see when he returns. End quote.
Well, I can tell you right at the top, that's the same thing I've said. I have said that before. I am not an MJ fan. You guys know that. He's not up there with me. On the mic, he's really good. I feel as if he was an announcer, he could probably be the next Bobby the Brain Heenan. But in terms of his in-ring work, and to Road Dogg's point, his lack of size, he's a mid-card act at best.
I think he's a mid-card act at best for different reasons. And the different reasons is that I actually think that he's a better in-ring worker than he is a talker. And the reason why is because if you actually listen to him, read it. Don't even listen, just read the transcripts. He doesn't really have range as a heel. He doesn't really adapt as a heel and he says the thing, like he just says outlandish things that are like culturally uncouth. Okay, fine. Well, if you expect that, I'm not surprised anymore. And if I'm not surprised anymore, then what are you actually talking about? Right. So for him to go out there and say things, and then that's another thing too, when he's supposed to be this grand heel, he says a lot of things that are just things that you shouldn't say that are more than likely true. Well, okay. So is he a brash babyface or is he this, shit talking heel? Well, if I believe what he says, then no. If I don't care about what he says because he said it before, then what does it matter? And that's where I think his actual shortcoming is. But I do believe that a lot more hype is being put into him because of the fact that he goes out there and he gets these scathing reactions. Sure. Okay, cool. Then that may work on the indies. It may work in MLW. It may work in AEW. Now in WWE, I think that if he's really worth his weight in salt, he has to adapt. It's just a different company. I don't care what wrestler you are, wherever you come from, whether you're coming or going to a new company, you still have to adapt to that company's culture and that company's style, and that's going to be relevant. I mean, it just is what it is because it's just a different time and a different company. You work at McDonald's and you go across the street to Wendy's, it's not the same thing. It's not the same burger, and that's all that it is. So will he make it in WWE? It's not a matter of if. He has to. It's literally his job to make it. But will he be the next Bobby the Brain Heenan? Well, I didn't think he has that in him anyway. And that's the difference between. See, the difference is like there's a lot of people. Very few people can actually talk with a point and get from point A to point B in 5 minutes and keep the audience engaged. There's a lot of guys that just use bullet notes and coast through a promo and get most of the promo over. The Rock can talk. Most everybody else just speaks. And you see what I'm saying? There's a little bit of a difference there. John Cena can talk. Yes. I want to hear what he has to say. Road Dogg Jesse James just speaks. He has his promo. He'll get through his promo, but I'm not really engaged. MJF is probably the best public speaker in wrestling, but I don't necessarily think that he's a great talker. CM Punk is a great talker. MJF.
It's about being captivating.
Exactly. And that's something that you can't teach that. It's like being 7 foot tall. But there is something about that extra something that separates a good public speaker that can deliver a line and a talker that engages you in conversation.
Well, I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of talker versus being captivating, because you're right. Rock and Cena, would it be too hard to say they're top 5 promos of all time, promo guys of all time?
In the last 25 years.
Sure, in our generation.
Yeah, in our generation, sure, because I would say that Randy Savage should be in that conversation as well.
Correct.
But I would say the Piper would be in that conversation as well. But that language is different and it was for a different time.
Right. And I think with the easiest way I can make this comparison, I've had this conversation before, is if you remember ECW when Bubba and Devon would just rip into the crowd.
Heatwave 99, baby.
Call them all the vulgarities in the book, and that's where their promo work died. Then Bully Ray became Bully Ray in TNA with a little bit longer leash. So he was able to cut a little bit more of a scathing promo. But to this whole conversation, how much could the WWE machine neuter MJF like they've neutered other talkers in the past? Because if you remember, before Control Your Seasoning, what won Ethan Carter III was regarded as a great mic worker.
Right.
And then his first 6 months or 4 months, he barely said 2 words. Well, on the other hand, AJ Styles apparently couldn't cut a promo, and he's one of the most trusted people to actually talk on the mic and perform in the ring at the same time.
Kevin Owens, same way.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and I think that's really the difference. You know, there's a difference between talking and speaking. And I think that Friedman, and that's also the thing too, that especially with that Heatwave 99 promo, listening to it now, yeah, sure, it does hold up. But if I listen to it every week, it would get old very quickly. Yes. Because once you're not shocked anymore, oh my God, he talked about this kid, and he talked about that lady's mom, and she likes apparently 9 inches of black dick. And it's a whole thing. And even saying it right now for the first time in 20 years or so, thinking about that promo, it's like, oh shit, he said that to people. And then went into the audience. And that was during the introduction.
Correct.
And it's crazy. Now, if I did it again next week, it would be old.
Right. Because it loses that speciality. Exactly.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of what Friedman is for me. I was at Full Gear in Minneapolis. Friedman and Darby absolutely stole the show. And that was a hell of a match. With that said, that kind of turned the corner on his work rate for me. But now it's kind of like, I need you to be that guy on the mic and not just say things to, poke the bear. Well, okay, cool. I mean, I'm not bothered about that anymore. Oh, okay, you're rich and I'm poor. We knew this. Next.
Yeah, next. Yeah. Keep it moving. You're a rich guy from Long Island.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. Plainview. Yeah, cool. Get it. Yeah. And next. Next. Okay, cool.
What else you got?
What else you got? You're not gonna offend me with that anymore. So that's just what it is. And who knows? Because we haven't seen him since Los Angeles Dynamite 1st of June. So
sure.
That's well over a month. We're well over the 6-week mark. So if he comes back, when he comes back, who knows what he comes back as? And then of course, does he make it in WWE? I really don't think it's a far stretch to say that he won't, because there's no precedent for it. But the bottom line is, it's literally his job. And if he's as good as he thinks he is, it's his job, then the question is, he'll make it in the WWE because he physically has to.
Right. All in all, who's to say at this point? It's still a little early. We always talk about his contract being up, blah, blah, blah. But we will see. MJF is an interesting, quite mercurial talent. But depending on what show he's on, will he be allowed to cut a promo? Will he be allowed to be himself? Or will he be spayed and neutered like Bob Barker's pets? Mm. But there is a show this weekend, sir, going on. And it's not just the indie spotlight. We actually have an ROH show. Mm. Yes, it does exist, kids. ROH still exists. And in its weird ROH AEW form, where we're blending the rosters together. Fine, cool, whatever. But what's it called? Death
Before Dishonor.
Before Dishonor.
Yes.
This Saturday.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I think it's I'm calling it the first pay-per-view that is the Con pay-per-view. It's the first pay-per-view in the ROH AEW Tonyverse. And I don't count Supercard, which obviously happened, because that was going to happen regardless. Whether it was the last show ever for Ring of Honor or it playing out the way it obviously played out, that show was already on the table. It was already booked. Con wanted nothing to do with it. But now here we are, phase 1 of the Tonyverse. We have Ring of Honor's Death Before Dishonor this Saturday at 8 p.m. in beautiful downtown Lowell, Massachusetts.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, granted, Lowell is like old hat for Ring of Honor. Stomping grounds. I believe AEW's been there before too, so it's not like the folks up there don't know the product. But whoa, cool. Which also isn't something's in Boston this week. Yeah, SmackDown. SmackDown's in Boston tomorrow. So if you're up there, SmackDown's in Boston, and then you go up the street a little bit, 40 minutes to Lowell for the pay-per-view on Saturday. Pay-per-view on Saturday. Love Saturday pay-per-views. Sunday's pay-per-view is just dumb. It's at 8 o'clock on Saturday. Here's the thing. I do think that this is interesting and the way the card has been positioned. But there is a question from Mr. Bearfax. Does Impact Wrestling still exist? The short answer is yes.
They're on right now.
Yeah, I believe they're on Thursdays on Access TV.
Correct.
And they have a thing before the Impact. The question is, do you care? And actually, this is now like a good time to get into Impact because I'm not going to say they're turning the corner, but they've definitely signed some names. They've had some matches. There's been some buzz about Impact. So if you're looking for them, I suggest this is the time to seek them out. And I rarely say that about Impact, but about Ring of Honor, because
I'm looking at the card right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the card for this thing, and you have Allison Kay versus Willow Nightingale. Cool. Not mad at that. It's on the pre-show. And actually, I'm not mad at that either because all eyes are on them. It sets the table for the show. It's not the only women's match on the total card because you have Mercedes Martinez versus Serena Deeb. Nice little match that's for the women's title. Mm-hmm. And actually, you know what? Not even going to go through the whole card. Watch Dark from this past Tuesday. That was actually a really good go-home show setting up the pay-per-view. In total, you saw a lot of the participants that are going to be there, except Samoa Joe, but Jay Lethal addressed that because Joe doesn't want to work. I actually think that it's a really good setup on this week's Dark on YouTube if you're interested in the pay-per-view. And because it's Khan, the Righteous, which is Vincent Bateman and Dutch versus Dalton Castle and the Tate twins, the boys, are for the 6-man championship. I didn't know they got those back.
I didn't know they got those back until just now.
Didn't know that the Righteous are the 6-man champions. Okay, cool. But apparently that's a match that's happening. I'm glad to
see the Tate twins.
Yeah.
I'm always glad to see them.
Glad it's good. You know what? Pay that mortgage, boys. Pay that mortgage. But it is interesting to see what this is. And you have Gresham versus Claudio. That's for the World Championship. Samoa Joe versus Lethal. Yuta versus Garcia. FTR versus the Briscoes 2. Martinez versus Deeb. 6-man tag champions. There's a lot of people that are signed to AEW. There's a lot of people that aren't signed to AEW. I think all of the matches, top to bottom, even the pre-show, should be pretty damn good.
Correct.
The elephant in the room is Ring of Honor still doesn't have a presence outside of the pay-per-view.
Nope. And the occasional Rampage.
Yeah, the occasional Rampage match and promo. Dark was kind of dedicated to Ring of Honor in a very loose way this week, but that was unannounced and unexpected.
So let me ask you a question.
Shoot.
Really quickly. Regarding the pay-per-view itself, what is a successful buy rate for this pay-per-view? Because Khan is really big on numbers and buy rates. What do you think would be deemed a successful buy rate?
50,000.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because they didn't really advertise Ring of Honor as a brand. No. A lot of the big advertisement from AEW side has been coming through Yuta versus Garcia on AEW television. FTR cut a hell of a promo from the Briscoes, who we've not seen on AEW television. And then Deeb and Martinez has been doing a thing on Dark, which has 0.001% of the total ratings for Dynamite. I think maybe 15,000 people watch Dark live, and then we're talking 900,000 people watching Dynamite live. It's not comparable. So if we're talking about word of mouth spreading through the Tonyverse, if they can get 50,000 to spend $40 in the pay-per-view, and that's also a thing that should be considered too. It's not, these matches are good, but if you don't know who these people are, and if you're not really invested in the lore, this actually was kind of leading up to my question. Are you willing to invest financially into Ring of Honor?
Right.
I mean, yeah, sure. If you want to pay $40 for a good wrestling show, then this is the $40 you should spend it on. But as far as it going long term, without a television deal, without consistent presence on AEW television, what are you kind of spending your money on?
But what's their identity too? That's another thing. What is their identity? Because if AEW is supposed to be the wrestling alternative to WWE, what's Ring of Honor?
Right.
Are they the wrestling alternative to NXT 2.0? If that's what they're designed to do, to be a feeder system.
Well,
and we talked about that. Well, that's what we've talked about in the past. I feel that would have been successful to make them a feeder system to AEW.
I would agree with that, but then we have so much high profile talent, high profile in the legacy of Ring of Honor, high profile in the current ecosystem of AEW, that it would be disingenuous to call it a feeder system or AAA Ring of Honor or AAA AEW. So now that's not really the case as it's being currently presented. I think that ship has sailed. With that said, though, without a path forward, and this media scrum was earlier today. I know that there were questions about a TV deal, and that's still up in the air. And that's the long and short of that.
He's got to be tired of getting asked that question.
Of course he has to be, because he just doesn't know. He doesn't have an answer for it. But the long and short of it is that if I'm paying $40 for something outside of just a good wrestling show, if I'm paying $40 to invest in Ring of Honor, and of course this pay-per-view would not be on Honor Club, so good luck with that. If you guys invested in that. Walking that back is kind of a bitter pill to swallow. So I don't know. I don't know if this is outside of just matches. I don't know if this is something that we're investing in right now. And they got to do something. They can't go on just like this. They got to keep it moving. Develop another show for Dark, and keep it moving.
On paper, this show looks good. I am a wrestling fan, like pro wrestling, and Castagnoli, and Gresham is on paper, because again, we like to say dream matches, but I feel like that term is being overused, and it's going to be worth to watch. I'm actually more interested in Yuta versus Garcia.
Yeah,
and I think they've tangled on the indies before, but I've never seen them do it. So on a grander,
was Beyond a couple years ago.
Was it Beyond? Yes. Okay, on a grander scale, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And here's the one thing about Yuta I don't want to be his commonplace, is where he's the guy that bleeds every single match, because it's going to get annoying and it's going to get boring that Yuta's going to be the plucky underdog that bleeds every single big match to create a moment. How about you just give them 10 minutes, have a great wrestling match, and leave it at that?
Just let him work. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Just let him. I mean, you're on pay-per-view. You don't have that many constraints. Just let him work. But I do agree that Yuta versus Garcia has the potential to steal the show.
Without question.
Yeah.
For me, without question, that's the match to keep your eye on. And y'all can let us know in the chat too. If you're here on Twitch or on YouTube, let us know in the chat what's the match you're looking forward to for Ring of Honor. If you're even interested in Ring of Honor, what could get you interested into it? Because a TV deal is the first step. But before we get out of here, y'all, Jamal has one story he wants to cover before we get out. And what is that story, sir?
Okay. Well, first of all, we do the Indie Spotlight every week because we still want to spread wrestling from around the world. And I have to say that right now, Terminus, if you haven't checked that out, from Jonathan Gresham and Blair and Black, they are doing a show right now as we speak down in Atlanta. Terminus 3 is happening. You can catch it on Fight. And catch the replays of that. It looks like a hell of a card, but the bottom line is that you have Gresham versus Konosuke Takeshita, who's on just a spectacular run.
Yeah, he needs a win, man.
I mean, true, but if he's not in the conversation of Wrestler of the Year, then I don't know what we're talking about. But
and Dax.
Yeah, that match is worth your $15.99 or whatever it is on Fight. So. Definitely give that a check out this week, right now, actually. So the one story, because I know that we have a bit of news. I know next week we're definitely going to talk about Ric Flair's last match at nauseum, because Jeff Jarrett won't shut up about it. We're definitely going to talk about SummerSlam weekend, of course, because that's going to be a very interesting pay-per-view. Then, of course, we're going to have a better idea of what the weather's going to look like in Nashville, because Nissan Stadium does not have cover. And that Nashville sun, as I've been saying over the past few weeks, that Nashville sun does not care. So bring your sunscreen if you're going down here, because good Lord, it's going to be a long one. This one story is not wrestling related, but I want to take a little time really quickly to talk about it. How long do you think a flight It's a Los Angeles thing. So Kendall Jenner, your favorite
Oh
Kardashian,
God.
she took her private jet on a flight from Van Nuys to Oxnard. Now, if you're not familiar with that section of the LA area, the flight was 12 minutes. Now, you're a New Yorker, so I'll keep it local. That's like flying from Teterboro to Westchester.
That's a hop, skip, and a jump. For no reason.
For no reason. Now, a lot of the comments are climate change. You ruin the environment. Have you sat in LA traffic before? I'm just saying that if I had a plane at my disposal and I can go from one side of town up the street, even if it was just to go to 7-Eleven, cool. I would DoorDash in my, in my G6 if I had one. So you know what? Leave Kendall Jenner alone. Let her joyride in her plane if she wants to. She's paying $12,000 an hour for gas, and you're not. And you know what? Be mad about it on the bus. The last thing that is wrestling related that I want to talk about is Dax Harwood. He did cut this really emotional story about this little girl that's been fighting for her life. And the little girl, of course, is his own daughter. And apparently, because of the outpouring of support as a result of his story, they came out with a shirt that says "Fight like an 8-year-old girl," with a little FTR logo on it. The proceeds from that PWT's shirt goes to the American Heart Association. So if you are interested and you want to do that, Pro Wrestling Tees has that shirt. And if you want to support the American Heart Association, that's a good way to do it because, it's actually a really good story. And it's one of those things that we were talking about, speaking versus talking. Dax Harwood was absolutely talking shit. He was not speaking to me last night. We were having a conversation, and I was hanging on every word. That's what that looks like. So ProWrestlingTees.com if you're interested, and go support the American Heart Association. Good guy, and that's it for me this week.
Well, there you have it, y'all. That is another episode of the Big Gold Belt Wrestling Podcast in the books. Myself, Damon G, and Jamal the Giant Crab. If you're interested, everybody, go check our website at biggoldbelt.com for news, reviews. We apparently have people at Comic-Con this weekend in San Diego. Our fearless leader has abandoned us for San Diego Comic-Con, so be on the lookout for that. Follow us on social media at Big Gold Belt across the board. That includes Twitter, that includes Instagram, and the like. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/biggoldbelt media. And thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully we have a better wrestling week. No one gets sued. Ric Flair doesn't die. And SmackDown has a better rating. Anything else, Jamal?
Let's go bets. And next week, Ric Flair's last match.
Please don't die.
I might spring for the Diamond Jubilee package.
No, you're not.
Okay, no, I'm not. That's insane. It's $275, but we'll see next week.
Later, y'all.
All I really need